Today, there's so much in our lives that influences us, our environment, the people around us. Sometimes we don't even know what's influencing us, and that's what we're here to talk about. Welcome to the Influence Today podcast with Chet Tart and Terry Lyles.
Welcome back to Influence Today. It's a great-looking day out today with Chet Tart and Terry Lyles. Welcome back, Terry. How are you?
Great. It's great to be back and looking forward to some conversation.
Well, this is good. Back to one-on-one, you and I, again,
Yes.
talking about different things. You know, the time this podcast airs, the Super Bowl will be over. We'll know who the winner is. Mm-hmm. And
no predictions. We'll just wait and see what the real score is.
Well,
because it'll be over. So there's going to be a winner. That's my prediction.
That's okay. Good. I'm glad you got that. Let's talk a little bit about the science of the Super Bowl, the mental attitudes of people on the Super Bowl, and coaching some of the Super Bowl coaches as well as the players. I mean, we talk a lot about lately about Bill Belichick and
Tom Brady.
Sure. And their mental attitude.
Yeah.
But there's a big focus on physical.
Right.
You are really working in the mental aspect of it, correct? So if somebody new wants to get into, you know, that type of teamwork, game, football, and they come to you and they want some mental workout, what happens? How do you start this?
Well, let me start by saying that there is such a differentiation between what people in their own minds that aren't sports science trained. They think that mental and physical are two separate things, and they're really one thing. So you're right. There's a lot of emphasis on the physical side of any sport, whatever that is.
Explain what one thing. You said they're not separated.
Because you can't separate your mind from your body. You would literally have to cut your head off.
Okay.
So that's pretty clear, right? So commonly people will go like, I don't need mental coaching or I don't need the mental aspect. But it's not even just mental. It's what we talked about before in the show. It's who we are mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically.
Correct.
Those four quadrants are who we are as navigators, as human beings. So it was not uncommon. I worked at a sports science clinic in South Florida for 4 years, did my internship there, and that's how I really got into deeper in the corporate training side of taking the sport model and converting the language to corporate America. And so many times people would just say, well, you know, you need the mental side of the training. But our thoughts impact our emotions. Our thoughts and emotions impact our belief systems, which are the spiritual side, and all those impact the physical energy levels of who we are and vice versa. So they're kind of like four cups. You could interchangeably stack them all, and as long as they're all the same size, it doesn't matter which one is which. They're all stacked together, and you can remove them and change them. One day I'm more mental. The other day I'm more emotional. The other day I'm more spiritual. The other day I'm more physical. But look, you can't separate those four. So having said that, I saw a lot of athletes that would come to our facility, and I still coach today even, that have their physical game down. They're strong, you know, they're agile, they know what to do, but many of them lacked on the physical side the most important piece. So there was three aspects that I look for.
Okay.
How strong are you? How resilient are you? And how flexible? And most athletes fail in the flexibility testing. And if you don't have flexibility with a muscle, a tendon, what happens?
It breaks.
It breaks. You get injured.
Yeah.
So a lot of athletes suffer injuries, not because they're not strong, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, not because they're not resilient, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, because they're not flexible. Listen, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically.
That's strong. So when I think of flexibility, I think of stretching. Is that correct?
That is from the physical side.
From
yes.
the physical side. And I can translate that into the emotional side and the spiritual side and the mental side, correct?
That's correct.
All right. How?
So how would one stretch their mental capacity?
By reading more, learning more, hanging around with smarter people.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so many times athletes think they've learned it all, or performers, they've learned it all.
So they're not coachable.
They could be coachable.
Okay.
Maybe they just don't realize that they're plateaued mentally, which means they need more elasticity. Look, if training a performer, whether you're a Broadway performer or an athlete, whichever the case might be, even a corporate executive, same thing. If you train to work at an 80% capacity of who you are, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, that's all you have. you're probably going to do 65% of that every day because no one's working at full tilt. If your 80 is your top, you're not working at 80 all the time. You can't do it. So the only way
you can't or won't. You just can't.
You can't because you need more capacity.
Okay.
And how you do that is you train at 90% or 95% by reading more, by emotionally stretching more, by spiritually challenging your own beliefs with other beliefs, and physically going beyond where you do by physical training and exercise physiology, mixing up your workouts to stay strong, secondary muscles, primary muscles. So if I train at 95% and I come in at 80% every day, I up my game like 15% in every capacity. 15 times 4, 60. There's huge results. If I can improve a performer by 1% in 4 capacities, that's only 4%. You give me a 4% increase on somebody who's already running high on all octane, I'm telling you, that's where superstars are made. It's not the big adjustments, it's the right adjustments, and they have to be made in all 4 capacities.
Okay, so it's small incremental moves.
Yes.
It's almost like the Japanese word kaizen.
That's correct.
Where you do 1% a day that adds and compounds.
Yes.
Correct. So let's talk about stretching for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems to be a part that I never hear about or see or in any kind of, it's always muscle training. You see everyone in the gym lifting heavy weights.
Right.
Is there a time where you actually have just stretching that goes on for these athletes?
Absolutely. I mean, stretching.
And what would be a good one?
Well, you know, stretching is also sport specific or performance specific.
Okay.
In general, you want to be flexible everywhere because flexibility just helps us perform at higher levels. My wife, Marcia, was a Broadway performer. You know, she was on stage most of her life. She was a cheetah in Lion King. You know, she retired. She went into acting and modeling. And to this day, she is still so flexible at her ripe young age, of which I will not say. And it's because she works at it. You know, so everybody knows what muscle memory is.
Yep.
So it's training your muscles, tendons, to go beyond where they are a little bit at a time, which gives us increased flexibility. So let's say you break an arm or I break a leg. It goes into a cast for 6 weeks. Is that limb stronger or weaker after 6 weeks when the cast comes off?
Oh, it's definitely weaker. I know. I've had it.
It's weaker.
Right.
What about the flexibility and range of motion? Is it more or less?
Worse.
Okay, good. It's worse. So you have less flexibility, right? And range of motion. What do you have to do to get it back to normal?
You have to go through therapy and actually use it.
Therapy, if you will, in this vernacular, is stretching that muscle set and tendon set to go back to where you were before or possibly even beyond. So is that painful at times to go to therapy?
Massively.
Okay. So when you're talking about mental pain, emotional pain, spiritual pain, physical pain, that's a good thing if we're growing. What we don't want is mental, emotional, spiritual, physical injury because we have to heal from injury. That's why we put a cast on it. You play through pain and you recover from injury. And there's a huge difference between them. And so many times we don't differentiate. So the art of sports science is the capsulation of those 4 capacities, being able to identify where are you in a percentage. And I measure all 4 of those capacities separately and then congruently blend them together. So if you score an 80% in your mental capacity and a 40% in your emotional and 80% in your spiritual and a 95% in your physical, what am I going to pay attention to? The biggest leakage that you have, right?
Right.
Look, it only takes 1 hole in a boat to have a problem. You don't need 4. It only takes 1 flat on 4 of those wheels on your day to work to have a bad day. So I go to the weakest point, bring that up to at least the lowest point of the next 3, and I've already increased your game by that percentage. It's huge.
This is amazing. We're talking about stretching. Is that the reason for the popularity of stretching? Tom Brady wrote a book, but his book is about stretching. He says, for me to get older and to play in this game, I need to be flexible. And now I see these new places called stretch zones everywhere.
Sure.
Is this something new, or is this something that we just weren't aware of or just became popular, stretching?
No, it's not new. I mean, it's...
And I attribute it to physical rather than anything else.
Correct.
Because that's where I'm seeing it all happen.
Yeah, and that's the example that we're using for the moment. No, it's not new. It's been around forever. I mean, from the martial arts, which are thousands of years old. It was all about flexibility. I mean, if you're going to kick someone in the head, you got to be able to get your leg over your shoulder. So if you can't do that, you're kicking at their waist, because you can't get your leg up. So flexibility training has been around forever. I think what's happened now, like a lot of things, is people grab onto one aspect of it and say, we can make a business out of this. Nothing wrong with that. But there's more than flexibility. There's three. Remember I mentioned it earlier.
The three, yeah.
Strength, resiliency, and flexibility.
Does anyone teach resiliency?
I mean, if you're really into sports science, you should be. If you're not.
Explain it. Let's boil it down to simple words. What is resiliency?
The ability to keep getting up, to keep moving forward, to keep crawling towards your goal. Mm-hmm. As I commonly say, if I fall forward, I'm 6 feet closer to my goal.
Can you teach that? Can you help
Absolutely.
me? All right.
And see, you go into a gym, it's very easy to see people that are very strong. They go in, they're pumping iron, they're doing what they do, and they're strong. You can see they're strong. But mentally, they could be a train wreck. They have no strength mentally, but they apply it to a physical attribute. And on the other hand, I know people that look very weak physically, and mentally, they're impenetrable. You couldn't change their mind if you put a gun to their head. Okay? So it's how do you find an equilibrium between those four capacities to make that work? So the trick with any performance or sport performance, whether it's a Broadway performer or an athlete, is you have to pay attention to all four of those capacities. You can't just be strong in one. I mean, how many times have we seen guys walk around, and Marcia and I, my wife will laugh, but you see a guy, big upper bodies, walk around, and he's got bird legs.
Yes.
And you're like, okay, so he only strengthened from the waist up.
Right.
Okay, that's a problem.
Most people don't want to do the legs.
Well, because it's hard work. It's really hard work.
Yes,
I mean, without going too far, my wife has great legs because she was a dancer her entire life. And she'll even say for her to work her glutes and her legs, she has to almost kill herself because they're so trained over the years with strength and remembrance of that strength. She literally has to squat massive amounts of weight to feel it.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? So, but that's because that was her training from 8 years old. So muscles are very interesting. They have a memory capacity just like our mind does, and our emotions and our spirits, which is our belief systems. So it's all about our range of motion. And if I can challenge athletes mentally to go beyond where they are by 1%, 2%, 3%, I've changed their game. If I can do the same thing emotionally, change their game, which means can I transition your emotions quicker than what you do? And I do this all the time with athletes. You can transition blood oxygen levels in 20 to 30 seconds by breathing correctly. So I teach them how to breathe correctly. And it's what we found out in fighter pilot training with G-force and G-loading. I transitioned that to race car driving 15 years ago and train drivers and athletes that are those drivers how to breathe before, during, and after a pit stop. It's simple tweaks that make all of the difference in the world that drives focus, the energy level between the focus, the emotional acuity and how to respond quickly, the belief system that I belong here. You can't beat me today because I've trained hard and physically my body can resist the pressures inside and out.
So, Terry, you have put a formula together or a process together for each person that goes into this training situation. And you've done this over the years, correct?
Thousands of times.
Here's an oddball question. How has it affected you personally?
Well, it's proven to me over the years why it works. My dissertation was on avoiding burnout. And I put a hypothesis together to write a dissertation. And for those who haven't written a dissertation, it's writing a book. And they give you basically 2.5 to 3 years to do your dissertation, your research, plus your course studies. So it's the most difficult thing in a PhD program because you can get through the coursework. But now you have to literally build a hypothesis, which is I'm going to set out to prove something. My hypothesis was if there's a lack of inner and outer balance, burnout is imminent. That was what I set out to prove. 3 years later, I proved it by about 800 research pieces I went through with different performers. They were pastors, nurses, athletes, students, compiled all that data and information. And what I mean by inner and outer disconnect, that involves the mental, emotional, spiritual, physical capacities. So by the time I graduated with this dissertation, it became my business. Because I'm like, if it's that good, it's got to work. And you know what? It does.
And it's powerful material that is not, I guess, taught in schools, or we're not in our environment.
It's taught more now than it used to be.
Yeah, but we're looking at special coaches like you who come along that we have to pay to coach us.
Absolutely.
Correct? Right.
That's correct.
So you can actually do this in every single one of these cups you were talking about.
Yes.
And it's about really, it sounds to me that it's important for all of us in order to grow is to stretch somehow, whether it's physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, right?
That's right.
And we all don't know how to do that. If there was, when you are training some of these athletes, do you know right off the bat if they're going to make it or not make it by their belief and about the behaviors they show?
Not always, because it depends on how much they want it. So the first thing I do is test an athlete or performer and figure out where are they in reality. So I use biometrics that I have, which gives us a physiological internal snapshot of their blood oxygen levels, their calories burned per minute, their heart rate, breath rate. I can see it from a physiological side because they can't lie to, biometrics. We see it. Number two is I use a survey system that I write about in my books that actually judges an individual based upon your own admission in each of those 4 capacities. And you give yourself a score. And then I regulate that score with what the biometric says. And there's usually some discrepancy, not always a lot, but there's something there. And I will see what your lowest capacity is, start there, and it brings everything else up.
Capacity in what area?
It could be mental, emotional. Most of us are weaker in one, and the other 3 are stronger. It's just kind of the way it works. Sometimes you'll see 2 that are weaker significantly. Typically, it's 1. Because our body and mind is very elastic, very resilient, as we said. Strong, resilient, right? So it will compensate. So if I hurt my back, I have to walk differently. This happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I tweaked my back and I'm walking differently, and all of a sudden now my knee starts hurting. Well, the reason my knee is hurting because it's changed my normal travel of walking.
The alignment is out.
Exactly.
Right,
So the alignment's off.
Wow.
So now my back gets better, but now my knee's busted. So this process we can see under microscope now, put a protocol together and say, give me a few weeks to show you what to do. And some of the exercises could be as simple as, if you're an athlete, mentally, I'm going to challenge you. I want you to read the first 5 chapters of my book, and I'm going to test you on it. And I want to stretch you. I want you to know this is you. And if they don't do it, I know they're not serious. Emotionally, I'll say, when you get caught off in road rage traffic, or when your spouse or girlfriend or whatever makes you crazy, before you react, take 2 to 3 deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, like we've trained on. I want you to practice that. Spiritually, I want you to just consider something else in your belief system. Doesn't mean you have to own it, but can you be tolerant to it? We see this happening right now in our political structure here in America, and it's bizarre. You look different than me, I look different than you. We start judging each other. Your politics are different than mine. My politics are different than you. We're judging each other. Can we just relax and go, what are we doing here? See, that's a spiritual gut check. And then physically, I'm going to challenge and confuse your muscle continuation of training to show you how we can make you bigger, faster, stronger for a shorter period of time.
Wow, this has been a powerful podcast today, and it's a lot of information. Is there one thing that I left out that you'd like to add before we say goodbye?
To any performer out there, don't stop believing. If you believe you can do it, you can. If you believe you can't, you won't. So the biggest thing I see with performers, if you've got the heart, I can give you the mechanics. If you've lost your heart because there was an injury or something else that you no longer feel the passion and the juices flowing anymore for what you've been doing for years, it's time to quit. But if there's still something there, I can give you the tools to get there.
That's powerful. Thank you, Terry. Appreciate
You're welcome.
it. You're
Good to be
listening to Influence Today. Terry's your email address.
Yeah, probably the website's probably better. Just terrylyles.com, TerryLyles.com.
And if you listen to the show, please do us a favor. Please rate it. Please like it. Please share it. Please tell everyone about it. And especially this episode today, share it with people so that they get better aligned.
And this is good with young kids, too, by the way.
Yeah.
We didn't go into that. Maybe we'll talk about that more later. But if you have young children that are trying to go up through youth football or basketball or soccer or what, all these concepts work even easier and quicker with kids because we all learn faster then.
The kids do all learn real fast. Thanks, Terry. Terry Lyles. It's terrylyles.com, correct?
Yes.
All right. And this has been Influence Today with Chet Tart and Terry Lyles.